The sound of rain pattered gently against the kitchen window as Molly set her handbag down. It had been another exhausting 12-hour shift at the emergency room. Another night of rushing between patients, comforting frightened families, and fighting to save lives. Her back ached, her eyes stung, but in her heart, she felt that quiet satisfaction only a nurse understands. The peace of knowing she had done good work. But the peace ended the moment she stepped into her kitchen. There, standing in front of the refrigerator, was her daughter-in-law, Crystal. Young, confident, and always dressed as if she were going to a party. She had a roll of tape in one hand and a marker in the other. When Molly smiled tiredly and said, "Good morning," Crystal didn't even turn. She peeled off a red sticker, slapped it onto the fridge door, and said coldly, "Don't open the wrong one, Molly. This fridge is mine now." Molly blinked in confusion. "What do you mean, your fridge?" Crystal turned and pointed at a bright red label she had just stuck to the milk carton. It read in bold letters, "Crystal, do not touch." Molly's hands trembled. "This is my kitchen," she whispered, her voice soft, fragile. "I bought that fridge myself when this house was being built." But before she could say more, her son Tyler walked in. Her only child, the boy she had raised on her own after her husband passed away 15 years ago. He stood beside his wife, avoiding his mother's eyes. "Mom," he said awkwardly, "Crystal's just trying to keep things organized. Maybe from now on, you could just buy your own stuff." The words cut deeper than any wound she had ever treated. Buy your own stuff. In the house she bought. With the money she earned from night shifts and overtime hours. All for him. Molly didn't reply. She simply nodded, turned around, and went quietly to her room. But as she shut the door behind her, something inside her cracked. The home she had built with love suddenly felt colder than any hospital ward. That night, she sat on her bed, staring at the framed photo of Tyler when he was 6. Missing teeth, bright smile, the little boy who once promised, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll buy you a big house." Now that boy was gone. And in his place stood a man who couldn't even share milk with his own mother. She opened her drawer and pulled out a folder. The house deed, her savings book, and her provisional will. All safely in her name. She sighed in relief. At least that was still hers. Days turned into weeks, and the cruelty deepened in small, silent ways. Everywhere Molly looked, she saw red labels. On the bread, on the butter, even on the shampoo in the bathroom. "Crystal, do not touch." She felt like a stranger in her own home. Sometimes, she would open the fridge to find her groceries missing. The milk she bought would be poured out, the fruit thrown away with a note that said expired. But she knew it wasn't about food. It was about power. And she noticed something strange. Crystal started talking about peace and quiet, saying maybe Molly should find her own place soon. At first, she thought it was just talk, until she overheard Crystal on the phone one night. "She'll leave soon," Crystal said, her tone sharp. "We'll get the papers transferred once she's out. Tyler's already looking at condos downtown." Molly froze. Her hands shook so badly that she had to hold onto the wall. Were they planning to take her house? That night, she didn't sleep. She prayed instead, asking God not for revenge, but for clarity. And when morning came, she knew exactly what to do. She began documenting everything. Every insult. Every missing item. Every red label. She took photos with her phone and wrote down the dates and times in a little blue notebook. She even recorded conversations on her smartwatch. And one afternoon, while cleaning Tyler's drawer, something she hadn't done in months, she found what she wasn't supposed to find. Receipts from fancy restaurants, jewelry, designer shoes, a loan agreement for $35,000 that he never mentioned. And tucked beneath it all, a real estate flyer for a luxury condo in downtown Chicago. One line was circled in red ink. "Deposit once Mom's house is sold." Her heart dropped. But the worst part was still ahead. Inside the same drawer was a printed chat between Tyler and Crystal. In the messages, Crystal wrote, "Just make her feel cramped. She'll want to leave." And Tyler replied, "She'll never see it coming." Molly sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the papers in her trembling hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Not because of the betrayal, but because she realized how blind love had made her. She had given up everything for that boy, her rest, her youth, her savings. And this was what she got in return. When her best friend Nora, a fellow nurse, came to visit the next morning, Molly finally broke down. "They want me out, Nora," she said, her voice shaking. "My own son and that woman." Nora listened quietly, then reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then don't cry, Molly. Fight smart. You're not weak. You're just tired. But I know someone who can help. That someone was Avery Chun, a property rights attorney. When Molly met Avery, she showed her all the photos, receipts, and messages. Avery's calm face turned serious. They're occupants at will, she said firmly. That means they live here only because you allow them to. You can legally remove them, but we'll do it the right way. Quietly, step by step. For the first time in weeks, Molly felt a spark of hope. From that day on, she became someone else. Not the gentle nurse who stayed silent when people pushed her around, but a woman who had found her strength again. She kept smiling when Crystal mocked her. She nodded politely when Tyler avoided her eyes. But deep down, she was building her case, piece by piece, like a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. She set up a camera in the kitchen. She recorded every word. And when Crystal's parents came over one weekend, pretending to be concerned, the conversation that followed became the final piece of evidence. "Don't you think it's time you moved somewhere quieter, Molly?" they said sweetly. "Maybe an assisted home? You deserve rest, and the kids can take care of this big house." Molly smiled, calm and composed. "Thank you for caring," she replied. "But I like it here. It's my home." They didn't know she was recording everything. When they left, she walked straight to the kitchen, peeled off every red label, one by one, and threw them in the trash. Then she whispered softly to herself, "This house was built with love, and love doesn't surrender to greed." That night, she sat by her window, the Chicago skyline glowing in the distance. Her hands were steady now, her heart calm. She knew what was coming, and she was ready. Soon, Tyler and Crystal would learn that the woman they underestimated wasn't just a tired old nurse. She was the owner of the house, and the keeper of her own peace. The next morning, Molly woke up before dawn. The city of Chicago was still asleep, the streets outside damp with fog. She brewed herself a cup of coffee and sat at the dining table, staring at the empty chairs around her. This was the same table where she used to help Tyler with his homework, the same kitchen where they'd laugh over pancakes on Sunday mornings. But now silence, just the hum of the refrigerator, the same fridge that had once carried those cruel red labels. Yet this time, Molly didn't feel weak. She felt calm, ready. Attorney Avery Chun had drawn up the notice, a formal 72-hour eviction letter addressed to Tyler and Crystal, legally written, airtight, and firm, just like Avery herself. When Avery handed it to her, she said quietly, "Molly, this will end one way or another. But remember, it's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming what's yours, your home, your peace, your dignity." Molly nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "For years, I fought to save lives. I think it's time I saved my own." That evening, as the sun melted into a pool of gold behind the skyline, Molly stood at the living room doorway and called out, "Tyler, Crystal, could you both come here for a moment?" They appeared, Crystal's arms crossed, Tyler's eyes wary. "What now, Mom?" Crystal snapped. Molly's voice was calm. "I need you both to read this." She handed them the sealed envelope. Tyler frowned, ripped it open, and the color drained from his face. It was the notice to vacate. "You're evicting us?" Crystal shouted. Molly looked at her steadily. "Yes, you have 72 hours to leave my house." Tyler tried to speak, but his voice broke. "Mom, please, you don't mean this." But she cut him off gently. "I do. You made your choices. I'm making mine." Crystal stormed off, slamming the bedroom door. Tyler stood frozen, eyes full of shame. For the first time in his adult life, he looked small, like the boy who once cried because he lost his backpack on the first day of school. The next few days were a storm of emotions. Crystal screamed, cursed, and threatened legal action. Tyler barely ate. He followed Molly around the house like a ghost, trying to speak, but the words never came. And then, on the third day, everything collapsed. Crystal's phone rang, and Molly overheard the conversation through the open door. It was a man's voice, smooth, confident, not Tyler's. "Babe, I told you it would work," the man said. "Once you're free of her and that loser husband, we'll get that condo downtown. I've got your deposit covered." Molly froze. Crystal's face went pale. Tyler heard it too. His world shattered in a single second. "Who the hell is that?" he demanded. Crystal hung up, her eyes flashing. "It's none of your business." Tyler stared at her, realizing how blind he'd been. How she had used him, used his mother, just for money. Within hours, Crystal packed her bags, emptied their joint savings, and left. Not a goodbye. Not a glance back. The house was quiet again. Tyler sat in the living room with his face buried in his hands. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking. "I've been such a fool. I don't deserve to be your son." Molly stood by the doorway, watching him. Her heart was heavy, not with anger, but with a kind of sadness only a mother can feel. "You made mistakes, Tyler," she said softly, "but you're still my son. I can't heal your choices, but I can give you one last chance." He looked up, confused. "You can stay," she continued, "but only for 7 days. No alcohol. No excuses. You'll find a job, you'll attend recovery meetings, and each night, you'll write down 3 things you did right that day. If you break a single rule, you leave." Tyler nodded through tears. "I'll do it, Mom. I swear I'll change." For the first time in years, Molly saw the spark in her son's eyes again. The same spark she saw when he was a little boy learning to ride a bike. He started small. He cleaned the garage, fixed the leaky tap, sold his old gaming console to pay part of the electricity bill. He even apologized to the neighbors for Crystal's rude behavior. Each night, he left a note on Molly's kitchen counter. Simple, honest reflections like, "I applied for 3 jobs today. Didn't drink when I wanted to. Cooked dinner for Mom." She smiled. Day by day, the tension in the house softened. Weeks passed, then months. Tyler got a job at a building supply store. Steady work that paid enough to cover his bills. He opened a small savings account and began paying Molly back. Not because she demanded it, but because he needed to prove something to himself. And for the first time, their dinners were peaceful again. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they sat quietly. Not as enemies, but as 2 people who had finally learned how to listen. Then one Sunday, Tyler came home with someone new. A young woman named Lena. Soft-spoken, kind-eyed, and nothing like Crystal. She shook Molly's hand gently and said, "I've heard so much about you. Tyler talks about how strong you are." Molly smiled. A real, warm smile. "Welcome, dear. You're always welcome here." And she meant it. That afternoon, they cooked together, laughed together, and for the first time in a long while, the house felt alive again. The air was lighter. The ghosts of pain and betrayal seemed to finally fade into the walls. Months later, during a small Sunday lunch with friends and neighbors, Tyler stood up, walked to the fridge, and pulled out a new label. Everyone watched as he stuck it on a container of soup and turned to his mother with a shy smile. It read, "Mom, do not touch." The whole room burst into laughter, even Molly. That red label, once a symbol of pain, had become a private joke, a reminder of how far they had come. In the years that followed, Molly found a new purpose. She set up a nursing scholarship in her late husband Frank's name, helping young nurses who couldn't afford school. She also began volunteering at a support group for parents who had been hurt or taken advantage of by their own children. When she told her story, people cried, not out of pity but admiration, because she had done what many couldn't. She stood up for herself, with grace and courage. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Chicago skyline, Molly sat by her window with a cup of tea. She could hear the faint hum of city life below, distant laughter, the sound of a passing train, a child's voice somewhere down the street. She smiled to herself. She had lost a lot: time, trust, peace, but she had also gained something far more powerful: herself. And as she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, she realized something profound. The true measure of wealth isn't the house, or the furniture, or even the title on a deed. It's the peace you carry inside, the dignity you fight for, the love you give, even after being broken. Tyler visited every Sunday, sometimes with Lena, sometimes alone. They'd talk, laugh, and share a meal. No red labels, no bitterness, just quiet understanding. And every time he left, he'd hug his mother tightly and whisper, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Molly would smile, pat his back, and reply, "Thank you for coming home."